Welcome back. You're watching Newswire with me, Aiza Umar. Now we'll be talking about another country that has been under discussion, making the headlines continuously, and this is Sudan. Right now, Sudan's opposition announced plans for more mass demonstrations after the country's ruling generals rejected an Ethiopian proposal for a transitional government. On Monday, Sudan's ruling Transitional Military Council had rejected this plan, which effectively to end the political deadlock over the composition of a new government was floated earlier. Now, instead, they said what could be done was to salvage this by merging the Ethiopia proposal with that of an earlier option offered by the African Union. Now, this is, of course, a problem because when the Ethiopia plan was offered, the civilian opposition had accepted it. The plan centers on forming a transitional government, a kind of a sovereign council, you could say, comprising of 7 civilians and 7 members of the military, with 1 additional seat reserved for an impartial individual. So what we will be discussing with our guests today is the future of Sudan, as once again impasse between the ruling military junta and the civilian protesters and opposition parties has been brought into the process of the democratization of Sudan. I'd like to welcome my guests here. We have with us Dr. Marwa Ibrahim, an activist who's joining us from London. She earlier on was living in Sudan. And also we have Dr. Ahmed Miqlad, an analyst who's joining us from Sydney. Let's start with you, Dr. Miqlad. Let's talk a little about this current move. What is it for the opposition parties or the Sudanese who are now already planning for protests? What is it for them if they were to follow what the Sudanese military is saying to merge these 2 options?
Well, we've been dealing with the military council for a while now, and we have seen the same attitude of al-Bashir regime as if it hasn't changed. We could see clearly their intentions. They do whatever to waste time, to try to, look into the smallest of the tiniest things to refuse and reject and delay times of negotiations.
Right. So you're saying the attempts by the military junta is not genuine. But if you could spell out for us, what is the biggest opposition to this merging of the 2 plans?
It is not about the merging of plans. Even the merging of plans, they don't aim to reach a conclusion. Because meanwhile, what they're actually doing using the national TV in Sudan, they are actually trying to, promote themselves as the only saviors of Sudan and the only, option for the Sudanese people to have peace in Sudan is that they remain in leading the country. So this is what they're actually promoting in the local TV. They're cutting the internet and they're actually delaying any real international deal. Meanwhile, they're promoting themselves to the local communities, the poor communities, the leaders of the small tribes around the country, and then on local TV, they're promoting themselves as the only rule that can save Sudan from killings and the unrest.
All right. So let me move on. Dr. Marwa, what's your take on this? Is this the situation that essentially underlines that Sudan is once again back to square one?
Well, I would say I can't agree. Thank you for having me. I can't agree more with what Mr. Miqlad said, that the Transition Military Council never had a good intention about handing the power to civilians. They are bluffing. We expected that they would reject this proposition, giving different reasons, whether merging with the African Union proposal, and tomorrow they will come with another reasons. Their main reason is they are refusing any proposal that will take off their power.
So essentially, they're just trying to, these are what Mr. Miqlad said, that these are essentially delaying tactics. They're never going to hand over power to the civilians.
That's correct. This is what we think. But the only way we have is to corner them through using all the peaceful available means.
Which is demonstrations.
As he mentioned, that there is a call for continuous of demonstration. We've come far, and we will. Sudanese people realize that if our demands are not met,
But the demonstrators themselves must be, Dr. Marwa, so afraid right now. They must be scared because, let's face it, June 3rd was a bloody massacre in Sudan. I mean, there were hundreds who were killed. And analysts are saying Sudan right now is in the grip of the RSF militia.
Well, that is true. And the intention of these militias who their act was endorsed by the Transition Military Council is to intimidate people. So they choose either between their security and safety or achieving their demands, which is a civilian-led government.
Okay.
What we're saying, our message to the Transition Military Council is that we will not be cowed. People are coming now out. There is a big demonstration we are calling out for on the 30th of June, which is the anniversary of this dictatorship, which we think the Transition Military Council are people and it's the same regime with the different faces. The same criminals who committed wars in Darfur, and now they're committing the same crimes in Khartoum. People will come out in millions. We will continue our all peaceful means to force this government out, for them to hand the rule to a civilian government.
All right. Okay.
We will also rally the international community to exert more pressure, because this government is supported by a regional government.
Right.
And until we reach what we are out for,
the demonstrations are going to continue. Dr. Marwa, thank you so much for your valuable time there, giving us an insight on how these demonstrations are being planned across the Khartoum and across Sudan. Here we're also joined by Mr. Rashid Sid Ahmed. He's a Sudanese Communist Party member. He's joining us from London. Thank you so much for giving us your time, Mr. Rashid. We're talking about an impasse which has again come in between the military junta and the Sudanese. And right now, do you feel like the international community could play a constructive role in breaking this impasse?
Thank you for having me again. Yes, I agree that there is more than one leverages to change the impasse in Sudan. The main thing is the determination and perseverance of our Sudanese revolutionary forces in Sudan, and of course the international pressures on the TMC to hand over the state back to the civilians is important. The other thing is, from what I gathered from your distinguished guests, Dr. Marwa and Dr. Mughlad, I gleaned some idea about the previous questions, that the council is adamant not to pass the packet to the Sudanese revolutionaries, and this is actually being expected from day one. From day one.
But do you think, let me just interrupt you here, is there any possibility, even if they are offering to merge two options, two plans, do you think there's any wiggle room with the opposition that they might come on board?
Well, opposition and the freedom and change, I mean, they are just acting upon the will and the wish and the demand of the people. And the demand of the people is a civilian rule. If this is being passed to us without having these obstacles of having them on the helm to continue the previous deposed regime and to reactivate the deep state, which is being built through 30 years, then there is no problem in that. But actually, we believe they are not, because they are puppets of the Muslim movement inside Sudan, and from some regional powers who have got vested interest to keep the military on top.
And that's a big problem. We're talking about regional powers who have quite a sway in how Sudan's future pans out, in terms of there's no dearth or financial support coming from them. And also this complete blackout of the internet, or reports barely is trickling out of Sudan. This really does come in the way. It really puts out the question, how long can these demonstrators sustain themselves in protesting in basically a blackout situation?
Well, as long as it takes. I mean, you cannot come from the mid of this path, and you cannot have a nap or a siesta while the war is waging. So there is no, we have crossed the Rubicon, my dear. We have crossed the Rubicon. There is no way back. And some of the international powers or groups, they are doing something, but actually we don't need only cacophonous, hurly-burly hot air. We need a real pressure on the regime. The African unity, actually, on the 30th of this month, the time will pass for that leeway they gave them, and it coincides with the 30th anniversary of the coup d'etat, and there is preparations for large demonstrations. And I'm using this platform to make the world aware, as if they are taking us back up to 1920s or 1930s. This cannot work in this Sudan. And the blackout is
this is also taking probably a massive sort of impact on an already suffering economy of Sudan, which was essentially how this all started back in December last year.
True, but we are in a revolution, my dear. I mean, you cannot have it both ways. You cannot revolt and you don't expect to pay prices. This is finger-biting sort of war. Whoever shouts first or whoever screams first loses.
Right. And it is a matter of time, essentially, how this pans out as the world watching on this, what will happen in Sudan, as we are expecting very soon these demonstrations to begin on June 30th. Any kind of preparations that are in way in terms of breaking the kind of blackout that the military has imposed on the Sudanese?
Well, there is some pressures being applied on the international forces and to pressurize the companies, the servers owners. But this is not actually complete blackout. There is so many ways of us to get informations and to pass it out. Whatever you know now and we know now is actually being filtered from Sudan.
I'm sorry, we'll have to leave it at that. Very quickly, Dr. Ahmed, I want to get your remarks on something we wanted to touch earlier on the role that Ethiopia has played here. General Mohammed Hamdan, he said the mission of the Ethiopian envoy was essentially to pave the way for resuming talks. Do you think that chapter has closed, or there's still some hope there?
Since day one, we know that this chapter will be closed down by the military council. It's not going to go further because they already have the actual Sudanese people in front of them. They met with them inside the palace and they didn't agree. So even whoever comes forward with any idea or plan, the only idea that they will accept that if they will rule Sudan with no one sharing that with them, which will impossible happen. So I think we will come to a confrontation. We think the 30th of June this month will be a big confrontation, which will not be the last confrontation between protesters and the military council, but it will be one of the biggest.
One of the biggest.
We know at the end of the tunnel, we have big hopes for Sudan. We understand 100% that we will win. We have the whole Sudanese community.
Thank you. We'll have to leave it at that, Dr. Mikdad. We've run out of time. And also, Mr. Rashid Sidham and Dr. Marwa, thank you so much for giving your time here on the inside situation of Sudan as they prepare for mass demonstrations June 30th after the Military Transitional Council rejected all offers on the table. And that's all the time we have for now. We've got to wrap it up. We'll see you tomorrow with another episode of The Newswire.